Hi everyone, it's Allison, and I'm here for another installment of what I have learned from insert deck here. And this is a video I've been meaning to do for a week because I really wanted to do this one on the spring equinox, and work blew up and couldn't get to it. But we are in this spring season, and I knew I wanted to talk about this deck, and I knew I wanted to talk about it in spring. So sorry I didn't get it right in for the equinox, but hopefully you're having some springy weather. Well, depending on where you are in the world, I guess. For me in Canada, it's springtime. It's pouring rain today, which is why it's a bit gray. It looks like it's nighttime in this video, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. And I'm going to wait a couple days. I just did my week ahead reading. It's Sunday, the 28th of March, and then we'll release this later in the week. So the deck I'm going to talk about today is the Whispering Spirits Tarot by Joanna Nelson. And I am still not 100% sure how I feel about this deck and using it. I do really, really like it. But I'm just not a person who's really into cutesy decks. I look at them and I appreciate them. Like the Crystal Unicorn is adorable. And as a horse lover, I was kind of tempted by that, but I thought, when would I ever use it? And I backed this deck because I knew people were bananas for the Mons Tarot, which did not really appeal to me. But I could see the quality and I could see the thought that had gone into the cards. At the time I backed this, I was planning on doing some public readings at a local festival. And I was like, I don't really have anything for kids in case I don't generally read for kids, but at this local festival I was like, well, what if I get approached by kids or parents of kids and they want to just do it for fun, and I wanted like a kid friendly deck just in case. And this one I thought was the most suited to me. I do also have Kipling West's Halloween Tarot, which is definitely, I can't wait to do is one of these series on that deck, but I'm of course going to wait for Halloween for that. But that is not a kid's deck. Like it's kid friendly, but that deck is so rich. I cannot wait to talk about it. It's one of my all-time favorite decks. But this was going to be in the summer and I was like Halloween. So I got this one. I also have, I guess the only other thing that would be considered really kid friendly in my collection is the Low Rider Dachshund deck. Dachshund. I always say that wrong because I don't really know much about those dogs. But again, I was like, what if a kid hates dogs, or who knows? So it's probably just an excuse to buy another deck. But this isn't traditionally my jam. And then, and then the festival got canceled because of COVID. So, boo. Anyway. So that's the Whispering Spirits. So I do occasionally use it for myself. I've never read for anybody with this deck. But it's super easy. Like if you like the look of it, then definitely get it. It's so faithful to the Rider-Waite-Smith, but I think it does also many cards, obviously what I'm talking about today, add a layer of understanding that I just don't see in other decks, or just a slightly different perspective. And that's the thing. We can learn from decks even if we don't necessarily want to acquire them. Just an interesting perspective to bring to your own collection. And if you do want to buy it, then I'll include a link. I'm assuming it's still for sale. Should have checked that before I started this video. I'll put it in the description. I'll figure it out and put it in there. So the reason I like this better than the Mons Tarot is I really like the fact that you can map facial expressions onto these characters. Whereas Mons Tarot has like really specifically defined facial features. This spoke to me way more. And although I really appreciate the adorable nature of this deck, the artwork of this deck, I've never felt a need to get the Mons Tarot. Doesn't appeal to me. This one is way more my jam, although I think Mons Tarot, generally speaking, is the more popular of the two decks out in the world. This is the one I like. So I'm going to do what I always do. I've got a couple cards from each suit, and I'm going to talk about the majors first and then go through the suits and the ones that I like. The majors are what really did it for me in this deck, and one major in particular that really got me actually to buy this deck, because I love it so much. So I'm going to talk about that. So I'm actually today not going to talk about the majors in order because I'm going to leave my favorite till the very end. So sorry about that. So this is the Fool. And what I think is really interesting about this card is that to me, and I should say too, I didn't read this guidebook at all. She does have a good guidebook with it. And it's, pretty substantial for a little white book. But it's so faithful to the Rider-Waite-Smith. And I like being able to come up with my own meanings first. I do go to the guidebook sometimes, but I just haven't read it. So I don't know what she says about these cards. But to me, like, this dog doesn't look like it's trying to alert the Fool. It looks like it is there for the journey. And I really like that interpretation. Sorry, my dog just made a noise as I talked about the dog. Like, to start your journey is, you have to start. Sometimes you just have to, buddy, shush, shush, shush. I think he's snoring. Can you hear that? If you can't hear that, then sorry, but it's hilarious. Shush, 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 shush. Max, wake up. There you go. So you gotta start. Like, at some point you have to just like go off that ledge and just explore and jump into a new adventure. And in many decks, the Fool is like, he's called the Fool. But to begin the Fool's journey is not a foolish pursuit. It's just, you're naive because you're at the beginning of your journey, but that's also supernatural. Not supernatural, but it's very natural. So I do love that the dog is like, I'm here for it, which is also very dog. I don't know. I really like it. The dog is not trying to stop him. The Fool is not a dum-dum, and he's on his way. And again, because the facial expressions are not so defined, you can look at it in context of other cards that you draw and then find, like, your brain will fill in those gaps. It's a very cool thing. I love this Hierophant card. I've talked about this. This is probably the only card I've talked about on my channel. Maybe one other. But I just love this gentle teaching. It reminds me of my grandpa because he lived on a farm and all the chickadees would come to him when he went out to feed them every morning. And that's a real skill. Like, the birds are landing on these little kids. And this is just like me when I was a kid, holding my hands so still, hoping a chickadee might land on me. But teaching like this art of patience and trust, and to get a chickadee to land on you, like, consistently, like, that's work. It takes days and days of getting out there, and then they come to trust you and know you have food. And like, I just love the gentleness of this lesson and the patience that it requires. This little dude's got a chickadee on his head. Like, they've been attending that class. They've been learning that teaching for some time, and they are beginning to master it. And I love showing this stage of the learning and the Hierophant and what the Hierophant can be to people. I think that's super cool. A lot of these characters, they don't have to obey the laws of physics. These paper cranes are in just about every card. There's a little bowl of chopsticks in many cards. But I love the idea of this Chariot card. Makes me think of the imagination, because it's up in the sky. It's not on the ground in a traditional vehicle. And that a chariot journey doesn't have to be a literal one. It can be a metaphorical one where you are letting your imagination roam. And that's going to lead to then you roaming in the direction. But if you don't free up your imagination for that kind of thing, then when your horses or your lions get stuck and they're pulling in different directions, then maybe you haven't considered all of your options. I like the metaphorical journey that this suggests, just as an interesting added wrinkle to the Chariot card, which I often, not assume, but I often read that card as like more forceful and like, you got to make a decision now and you're moving forward in this incredible momentum, but maybe it's the beginning of it. The Death card is unsurprisingly very gentle. I don't always love a gentle death card, but I do dig this idea of an exchange, right? Like, that it is a natural part of life. There's a sun setting or rising, depending on your interpretation, but I think by the colors, it's setting. Now, this is tough because it's not always natural. It can be premature and horrific and in all sorts of different ways. But I think for a very gentle deck, it's still a death card. It's still an ending. And there is this sort of life being handed over and this understanding that death is a part of life. So I do like it. I don't know what to say about this moon card, except that I love that the dog is going to pounce on the other dog. Like, and that, like the moon, the sort of time of, it can be seen as a time of disturbance and of mystery, but it's also such a time of beauty. And for me, the moon is quite a joyful thing. Like I don't always jive with the depiction of the moon as something sort of broody or dark or mysterious. And there's a real sense of play in this card that I like very much. Now, finally, this is the card that made me get the deck. I love it so much. It's the Hanged Man, or in this, as it's known in this deck, the Hanging Spirit. And it made me gasp when I saw it. Because if you look at his little, so he's like a little sprout dude, and he's hanging, he's in one position, but he is growing and flowering. You see the little shoot that's coming out of his head that becomes that purple flower? I think it can be quite frustrating to be in that Hanged Man position, but it's also necessary. If we look at the major arcana as the Fool's Journey, then this is part of it. Stopping and being still is a part of it. And if you skip over that, then you might miss some vital, fundamental growth that you need to explore. And it's such a positive Hanged Man card. And often, the depiction isn't a negative one. Often it's quite neutral, but this is specifically about the benefits of being still and sprouting and growing. And I just really dig it. In a card that often just doesn't speak to me, or I'm frustrated when I have to deal with those times. And I don't recognize enough the value of that staying still, that hangman energy. So, I really like it. Oh, sorry, I just realized I forgot to show the backs of these, but aren't they gorgeous? It's a very pretty deck. And it's big. I should have, here's my Spacious Tarot. I just did my week ahead reading. So yeah, it's big. So I should have done that at the beginning. Okay, moving on to the suits. I don't really have a particular order, so I'm just going to grab the cups because they're in front of me. I've got 3 cards from each suit. I really like this Four of Cups. I just really like the explicitness of it, right? Like you are getting something from somewhere else and you are actively ignoring, right? It's not, and we get that sense from the Rider-Waite-Smith too, but like the effort of this little cloud to be like, buddy, right here, I get this thing. It's for you. I just love it. And the nature of actually turning away from it. I just think it's a really solid Four of Cups message that you think that you've got the resources around you that you need, but why would you turn down another resource that is being made available to you? So I really like that. I also really like this Eight of Cups. I like the peace that's imparted with the moon with the closed eyes. But also, this is a really different interpretation in that the character is looking back at the cups, right? Often in the deck, the person's turned their back and they've left. But I do think there's value in the message that don't forget, if you're moving away from a situation, to take with you the things that benefit you, even if that's pain, right? Because with distance and with time, there will be valuable self-examination to come out of that. I can definitely think of specific examples in my life where I had to move away from something, and at the time it was so painful. But the learning from it, that experience that made me face, in one case, a pretty hard truth about myself, I wouldn't trade that for anything. So just if you are in that such situation where it is time to move on, even if it sucks, like just don't try to diminish everything that happened there. There is good to be taken from it, probably. I mean, not every situation, probably, but some. Actually, what it reminds me of now that I'm talking out loud about it is the movie Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. If you have not seen that film, watch that film. It's one of the great films of the 20th century. I think 21st century, actually. Yeah, it would have come out after 2000. It's so good. And it's all about that, right? Thinking you don't want those lessons from the past, but actually you really do. And I just really like this Knight of Cups too. I mean, again, all of these characters are whimsical and they don't conform to the laws of gravity or physics. But I do find it super interesting that this is a character of the water who is in the air and far away from the water, right? All of the cup depictions, of course, have water. Of course, they do. They have water, especially the courts. And they're pretty traditional. But he's riding what looks to me like a seal-ish creature, and there's a flying fish up there. But they're out of their element. And I think that kind of like moving forward with that big emotional feeling, like that's a risk, right? You can feel super out of your element. Um, Putting your emotional trust and faith in a new situation or somebody else, or and I just really like that separation from the water in a deck that is actually very water heavy. There's a lot of, if you're a water person, there's a lot, like, well, we'll come to one actually. I've got it pulled out, for example. This is, I just think it's a really neat depiction. All right, on to the wands. Here I've got the Four of Wands. And I just pulled this out because, like, we usually get this celebration. But what I really love is it's like a celebration of differences, right? Like these people coming together. What it reminds me more than anything, actually, is Romeo and Juliet, and how that story does not go. Although Romeo and Juliet isn't really even a love story. It's about being stupid and young. But this idea that these differing little beings can come together in celebration, everything about the card is equalized. But also we see the celebration that's happening and across generations, which is why it makes me think of Romeo and Juliet, because also that play is about parents screwing over their kids. So I really like the greater nuance to this Four of Wands as compared to the Rider-Waite-Smith, where we see people coming out to celebrate, and this idea of people with their differences coming together and celebrating. The Eight of Wands, it just cracks me up. Whoa! Yeah, but I think it's also a good message to the Eight of Wands. Like, sure, charge ahead, right, with your passion and your ideas and your love. Just make sure you can hang on. Just keep it. And he looks to me in control still. He's still got enough strength to have his arms bent on the wand. He's not being dragged at the very end behind it. So just make sure that that energy is sustainable in a way that you can go along with it and that you don't sort of get left behind or swept away by it. I really like that. And then the King of Wands. Look at his little lantern on his head. Come on now. Little fire. But I also really like, I don't know what's happening here. And again, I haven't looked at the book, but again, because I think it can be interpreted in a number of different ways. So first, is he handing the wand over to his little lizard? Maybe, right? It looks like he might be giving it away. Is he demonstrating something? A little lizard's holding his arms up too, right? Like imparting wisdom as the King of Wands about passion and fire and those kinds of things. But it's an interaction that I really, really enjoy. I also like that throughout this suit, the wands have leaves at both ends, right? That your passions can grow in different directions and don't forget to neglect them. I just think it's so sweet. Okay, what do I do next? Do I care? I don't think I really care. So we'll do Pentacles. Three of Pentacles. I do like this card, but it really also, it really demonstrates the fact that all three of them need to be there in order for this to work, right? We've got the guy reading up the little directions, and then we've got the guy directing, but in order to get up to the top, little baby dude has to stand on his head in order to do it, right? That without any of the three of them, it probably wouldn't work, because the guy who's reading the directions has to keep his eyes down to be able to read the directions, blah, blah, blah. So this sense that without the three of them, and the three is such a balanced card, right? Like that pyramid shape, it wouldn't work without that sense of balance. And I do like that in the threes across the deck, the way that the three works as sort of a unifying force. The Eight of Coins, this is the one I was thinking of when I said it's a very watery deck. Like this is, well, I guess it could be paint, but to me it's like planting. Um, so he's like watering his plants so that they will grow. So again, this isn't a card that usually has a lot of water in it, but here it is. And I do love the care that each little individual coin is being attended to so that it can grow and be fruitful. And it's already so laden that it's bowing over to the ground. I do like that mix of artistry and earthiness very much. And then we have the Knight of Coins. And again, if you look at the coins and the colors that are in the coins, like he looks like he's painting the coins up there, and they've got a little bit of purple. I don't know if you can see. Again, all my lights are on. It's so dark outside today. And in this one, we've got the blue that's being painted onto the coins. And in this coin, we've got the purple of the fields below. Oh, God, the lighting is so terrible. Trust me, there's purple in that coin. And he's got purple in him too. But I love the idea, again, I love a Knight of Pentacles. But I do love the idea that he's surveying these newly plowed fields, right? Like this is a card of taking it slow and doing it right. And then if you put in that effort, you will see the result. But it's not dashing away like the other nights, like I've said 100 times before. It's like taking the detail of planting in those newly furrowed fields in order that something will grow. Finally, onto the swords. This is something I always, I've actually got 4 swords. This is something I always like about the swords, the 5 of swords, is that it's really not clear to me here where my loyalties should lie, right? And that, I think this card works really well when you draw it along with other cards and read it as part of a narrative. Am I supposed to be happy for the guy who's defeated enemies? Or am I supposed to be sad for the two in the background of the picture who have been defeated? Because we take away the smirk, the traditional Rider-Waite smirk of the person in the foreground, or is he feeling guilt? Is he better suited? He does look like a bit of a different being. He has ears and a tail, whereas these guys just look like little, like, is this a bully situation? And then he is regretting using his extra power, or maybe he shouldn't. I just love the options this card offers, and I think it's a great one. 6 of Swords for a similar reason. When we're facing them, you can work into the narrative whose story you want to tell here. Is it the person with the food or the little one who is looking out forward, or are you the person steering the boat, or who you're reading for, or what's the narrative here? And where are they going? I just really like being able to see their faces. It's a different angle. This 9 of Swords. Look at that nightmarish little image with the eyes and the trees. What I also really like about this 9 of Swords, by pointing the swords down right at the person, it's got this sort of image of like you're under the tree to be sheltered, but is that the best place for you? Or for some reason you're not trusting where you are. I think the fact that this person can so easily get out from under the swords and yet is not, it's just such an interesting level to this card. And again, is great when you put it next to other cards in a reading and you're trying to decipher, because I like cards where your interpretation can shift depending on the situation and the reading and the cards next to it and all of that. I like that. And finally, I chose this Queen of Swords. The Queen of Swords is a super important card to me. And I like it because she is just like no nonsense, and she's got her sword drawn, but these things around her are leaning towards her and not away from her. I think the Queen of Swords, this is, again, because I have this super personal connection to it, I tend to, because I sort of have to now because of my experiences with the Queen of Swords, I don't look as much at the negative aspects of this card as maybe other people do, and that's just my jam. But I like that she's a boss. But it's nothing is shrinking away. It's all close and looking at her and admiring her strength, her wit, her brains, her ability to cut through crap and BS when nobody else does. I really dig this. And again, it's the product, I'm sure, of being part of a gentler deck overall. But for my personal interpretation of the Queen of Swords, it just really clicks for me, and maybe it won't for you. So that is the Whispering Spirits Tarot deck by Joanna Nelson. Again, I'm not sure where this is going to hold a place in my collection, just given my aesthetic, given the fact I only really want to reach for it in the springtime. And even then, while I appreciate it so much, and I think she did a gorgeous job, it just doesn't jive with where I usually live as a reader. And if I'm going to start to get rid of some decks to make room for some new ones, this might be one that I consider passing on, but it would have to be to someone who was like desperate for it and really loved it, because I couldn't bear the thought of it being unloved. I do love it. I just don't end up pulling it out as much as maybe I should. But I do recommend it. If this is your jam, then I promise you'll love working with it. It's just, I feel really good just having looked through it today. I feel like it was good for my spirit. Maybe I'm never going to give it away. Maybe I'm going to keep it forever. I don't know. So anyway, that's what I've learned from Joanna Nelson's Whispering Spirit Tarot deck. I hope you enjoyed this. If it's still available, I'll put a link in the description below and you can check it out for yourself. So have a great day.